Is Trump's war on Iran turning into a big gift for Russia's Vladimir Putin? With his closest Middle East ally killed, is Putin still managing to come out ahead from the chaos? As Washington is distracted by missiles over the Gulf, is Moscow using the moment to lock in its grip on Donbass? With oil prices surging, are U.S. sanctions now close to becoming irrelevant for the Kremlin? 5 big gifts Trump may have handed Putin by launching this Iran war. Is the real winner sitting in the Kremlin? As U.S. Israeli strikes killed Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, analysts note that Vladimir Putin may have lost his most influential ally in the Middle East. Despite this setback, political commentators argue that the U.S.-led war against Iran could still deliver several strategic and economic benefits to Putin and the Kremlin. The discussion comes as the United States and Israel attacked multiple targets in Iran on February 28, killing senior leaders and provoking large-scale Iranian counterstrikes. In the days leading up to the operation, President Donald Trump claimed that Iran posed an unacceptable threat to the United States, using this to justify launching military action. Experts say Trump's justification closely mirrors the logic Putin employed to defend his invasion of Ukraine, namely acting preemptively against a declared security threat. Analysts warn this parallel may reinforce the broader idea that major powers can act decisively for their security, even when such moves challenge international norms and institutions. 5 gifts to Putin of Trump's war on Iran. Gift number 1. Putin's power rhetoric reinforced? Analysts say Vladimir Putin has long maintained that global politics is ultimately determined by military force and raw power rather than by international rules or norms. In the Iran campaign, US also openly pushed for regime change and treated senior Iranian figures as legitimate military targets. The action against Tehran came weeks after US forces helped remove Nicolas Maduro from power in Venezuela. Experts worry these US moves may reinforce Putin's argument that it is power, not principles, that decides what behavior is acceptable on the world stage. Russia's attempt to remove Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the start of the Ukraine war was widely condemned across the West. However, if Washington normalizes toppling hostile leaders, the Kremlin can claim it is simply following the same rules that the United States applies to its own adversaries. Moscow can also continue to repeat its narrative that NATO expansion created an unacceptable threat along Russia's border, mirroring US language about Iranian threats. Gift number 2. Distraction from Ukraine war? After months of pushing for a negotiated deal to end the Ukraine war, missiles instead began flying in the Gulf as the Iran conflict erupted. US attention has shifted from brokering peace in Ukraine to managing Iranian missile and drone strikes in the Middle East, according to reports. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has said Russia remains open to US-brokered peace talks over Ukraine. However, sources told Bloomberg that Moscow may walk away from the process if Kiev refuses to give up some territory as part of a settlement. Analysts say the new Middle East conflict is already complicating and slowing US-mediated talks between Russia and Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky has said the timing and location of the next negotiation round will depend on how the overall security situation develops. Ukraine's President Zelensky had recently suggested Abu Dhabi as a likely venue for early March talks. But the UAE has since become entangled in regional hostilities, throwing those plans into doubt. For Moscow, a Washington distracted by a second major war theater appears to be an advantage, according to analysts. Defense officials warn that key US missile and air defense stockpiles have already been heavily reduced by commitments in multiple regions. The same air and missile defense systems needed to protect US bases in the Gulf are also being used to defend Ukraine and Israel. If the Middle East conflict drags on, these limited inventories could be stretched even further, forcing difficult choices about where systems are deployed. Some strategists caution that a thinner US missile shield and divided focus could also weaken deterrent signals toward China over Taiwan. Gift number 3. Boost for Russia's oil industry? Global oil prices have climbed sharply in recent days, driven by fears that the Iran conflict could cause lasting disruptions to supply routes and export volumes. The Strait of Hormuz is a vital choke point that handles roughly 20% of the world's oil exports and is central to global energy flows. Benchmark Brent crude has already approached about $80 per barrel in recent trading, according to market data tracking the impact of the escalating conflict. $100+ per barrel soon, Kremlin envoy Kirill Dmitriev warned on X, predicting that continued tensions could push international oil prices into triple-digit territory. Such a spike would significantly increase Russian oil revenues at a time when Western sanctions have already reduced its energy income and narrowed its fiscal space. Russia currently exports around 5 million barrels of crude a day, and analysts note it earns more on every barrel sold when global benchmark prices rise. Kremlin propagandist Vladimir Solovyov has even said, "For our budget, attack on Iran is a big plus," framing the conflict's oil shock as a direct gain for Moscow's finances. If Gulf supplies remain disrupted for an extended period, major importers may be pushed to shift even more of their demand toward discounted Russian crude. Rising prices would both boost Moscow's overall income from fossil fuel exports and further weaken the intended impact of Western sanctions on its war economy. Gift number 4. European unity in shambles. European leaders are scrambling to recalibrate their policy toward Iran, reviewing their diplomatic, economic, and security options in response to the sudden escalation. Reports say the United States did not properly consult several key European allies before it began striking targets inside Iran, fueling quiet anger in some capitals. Experts say this sense of being sidelined has exposed fresh strains inside NATO, highlighting long-running tensions over burden sharing and decision-making. President Trump has publicly criticized UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer over his stance on Iran, saying he was very disappointed with London's response to the crisis. Analysts warn that any prolonged conflict with Iran risks deepening divisions within NATO and steadily eroding already fragile transatlantic unity. Moscow has long sought to exploit a fractured Western front, and the Kremlin is likely to seize on visible disunity inside NATO as a strategic opportunity. Gift number 5. U.S. credibility on the line. If the U.S. fails to achieve clear military or political results in the Gulf, experts say President Trump's credibility as a security guarantor in the region would take a significant hit. American influence in the Middle East has long rested on the idea that it can act quickly and decisively, projecting power faster than any rival when allies come under threat. A long, messy war with Iran, or continued waves of Iranian retaliation, would raise serious doubts among regional partners about Washington's effectiveness and staying power. Gulf states, already worried about instability at home, might quietly push the US to scale back its operations rather than escalate further and risk wider chaos. In this environment, Moscow would gain an opening to present itself as an alternative partner, offering weapons, energy deals, and diplomatic backing to states uneasy with Washington's approach.